5 quick questions for you. Who are some late round guys that you just keep on drafting, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that definitely depended on current ADP trends. If you asked me this a couple weeks ago, it would have been guys like Darwin Thompson and Matt Breida, who I was drafting constantly. Now, Ronald Jones is falling back. I'm taking him a lot. We don't need to discuss him again, but he's still a guy that I think has upside. Uh, Jalen Richard is a guy that I am seeing go way, way late. In your guys' draft that we were just discussing, he went multiple rounds after Daria Agumbawale, who is an interesting name to watch based on his preseason. The fact he's clearly going to make the team, might have a passing down role, but Jalen Richard went even after him. Jalen Richard has been what Daria Agumbawale hopes to be all offseason. He's going to be on the field as their backup. They cut Doug Martin, which was his biggest competition for backup duties there. I mean, DeAndre Washington looks okay, but Jalen Richard's a good back. I mean, he was very productive last year in the passing game. Josh Jacobs is, likely going to be the lead back, but I still think Jalen Richard should be drafted a lot more frequently than he is and a lot earlier than he is. He's a great late round running back target. For me, it's typically running backs. There's not a lot of receivers that I'm taking late, but one name is Tre'Quan Smith that I think is just completely undervalued as well. Has a chance to be the number 2 for the Saints.
All right, Darwin Thompson, Matt Breida, they are now more mid-round picks. But Ronald Jones, Jalen Richard, Tre'Quan Smith for Ben. Jamie, how about you? Late round guys you keep drafting?
It's funny because it's almost like the opposite of what Ben was talking about. I take Dare Gumbawale just with the thought of that he could be their best running back in Tampa Bay by the end of the season. It's kind of Heath's theory of Bruce Anderson. And Heath has said on our video show a couple times, can he just go back and delete Bruce Anderson's name and put Dario Gumbawale in there? Because, I mean, look, Peyton Barber is what he is, and Ronald Jones may never live up to what the expectations might be. I hope he does, but it's hard to trust that. And so take a flyer on a guy who could, eventually emerge as I don't want to say the Philip Lindsay of 2019, but he might be. I take Marquise Goodwin a lot just with the thought of this inconsistent receiving core for the 49ers and maybe the connection that we saw at the end of the 2017 season between Jimmy Garoppolo and Goodwin lives up to the expectations of what we thought it was going to be last year before Goodwin struggled and obviously Garoppolo got hurt. I take TJ Hawkinson late. I don't know if he's ever going to really rise to where people are drafting him to be a consistent number 1 fantasy tight end, or at least over the next couple of days. But I think once you get past, I'll say it again, once you get over the Jared Cook bridge the Jared Cook Delaney Walker bridge, there's Vance McDonald, and then it's kind of like, okay, maybe Austin Hooper, maybe Eric Ebron.
Still Jordan Reed for me. I like Jordan Reed.
Jordan Reed's fine. He's seems to be okay with the concussion. That's a good name to take a chance on as well. But I liked what I saw from Hawkinson in that third preseason game, and I think he could be serviceable to start the season, especially with that matchup against the Cardinals.
Okay, so Jamie mentions Marquise Goodwin, TJ Hawkinson, Daria Agumbawale. I just want to point out on Daria Agumbawale, he did not have a good preseason at all. He played in all 4 games. He averaged 2.6 yards per carry. He had 7 or more carries in all 4 games, and he averaged 3.4 yards per carry or worse in all 4 preseason games. So that doesn't really matter. It's 38 carries, but he didn't really do anything with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen that with all the Tampa Bay backs. They're having a hard time behind that offensive line. It's going to be a struggle. I mean, it's a struggle for any of them. The reason I would still go after Jones is I think he has the upside talent-wise to overcome that situation. But I do agree. Agumbawale is a guy worth drafting late. I just think Richard's definitely a better one. Couple other names that are preseason risers that are basically free anywhere because too many people don't monitor that information along with a guy like Agumbawale. Dontrell Hilliard has not gotten enough run as a late-round pick since the Duke Johnson trade. He's going to back up Nick Chubb and probably be the passing downs back. Darrell Williams, I think they're going to cut Carlos Hyde. He's now the Kansas City 3rd running back. He's a guy you can snag. Ty Montgomery is almost certainly going to be the Jets' 2nd running back and might even be in a little bit of a timeshare with Le'Veon Bell. These are all guys that preseason has told us should have gone up draft boards, and not all of them are actually moving up. So pretty decent late-round targets as well.
Yeah, throw Malcolm Brown in there too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, I got Malcolm Brown in that Barkley Gurley league yesterday. For me, DK Metcalf and now Dante Pettis. I mean, between Goodwin and Pettis, I don't know who I think I would take Pettis first. I think he has
Oh,
more
you should.
upside.
You should.
Yeah, but he's really falling into the double-digit rounds now. Okay, so these are supposed to be 5 quick questions, guys. So let's do the other 4 quickly. Give me a mid-round pick that gets drafted. Give me a mid-round pick that next year gets drafted as a top 24 pick.
DJ Moore.
Oh.
Easy. That's an easy question.
DJ Moore.
There's only one answer. It's DJ Moore.
No, I mean, there has not been a Panthers wide receiver that's warranted a top 24 pick since Steve Smith, maybe, right? Unless I'm missing something. So I don't know that I agree with that. Receiver
as talented as Steve Smith since DJ Moore showed up.
Yeah, in fact, he drew Steve Smith comparisons on draft day. Okay, DJ Moore is Ben's answer. How about you, Jamie?
Darwin Thompson.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. All right. And I'll take Calvin Ridley. I think he's got a chance to juju it this year.
Sure.
Or a chance to be really disappointing with touchdown regression. He's risky, but I like him. And boy, Calvin Ridley, a spoiler alert, his ADP on Yahoo is 69th overall. Like, I couldn't believe I was helping my brother with a Yahoo draft last night, and Ridley went like almost 80th overall. I looked at his ADP this morning, 69th overall for Calvin Ridley. If you start with Julio Jones, I wouldn't mind taking Calvin Ridley with him in round 6 or 7. And I love Ridley there anyway.
He's just as low on ESPN. I'm looking at my sheet. He's just as low on ESPN, but he's about 60th on CBS and at the FFPC, and he's like 54th at the NFC, which are a little bit more competitive money leagues typically.
All right, Calvin Ridley. Quick question number 3. Are we drafting Demaryius Thomas now after 7 catches, 87 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the preseason game yesterday against the Giants? Demaryius Thomas.
No.
Nope.
Quick question number 4. Are we underestimating Rashad Penny? With all this Chris Carson love, I just wonder if when the season starts, we go, oh, yeah, Rashad Penny's pretty good. This is why we liked him so much going into the preseason.
I don't think we're underestimating him. Chris Carson, there has been a lot of hype. Penny's still going in a reasonable range in the draft. He has plenty of upside, and I still think he's a good target. I'm taking more of him than Chris Carson personally. I typically do that with backfields that are a little bit unsettled. Take the cheaper option. So I think his value is correct. I don't think we're necessarily undervaluing him, but he's still worth targeting for sure.
I think when you start to stack him up to the other guys that are in similar situations, Ben mentioned 2, I guess, Matt Breida and Darwin Thompson, Latavius Murray as well. I think those guys are going to have the opportunity for not similar workload in some cases. I don't think that Darwin Thompson's getting more touches than Rashad Penny right away, but I think Matt Breida and Latavius Murray potentially will, and there's probably a little bit more success ahead for those 2 guys right away, barring an injury.
Okay, last question. I don't know how quick it will be, but here we go. Can I push back on this whole 0 RB thing? And I feel kind of bad doing it now since we've been touting it for a couple of weeks, and I still think it's very viable. But here's my question, right? Let's say you have a late pick in the first round. It's a PPR league. You start your league with 2 top 7 wide receivers, and you're just thrilled about it. It's Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Thomas, whatever. I think, it occurred to me last night as I was doing this in a draft. In the 3rd round, my running back was Chris Carson. It was almost Leonard Fournette in a Yahoo league. Leonard Fournette has a pretty low Yahoo ADP. Ben's going to talk about that. But, so I don't have necessarily a total stud, a guy who could be McCaffrey, who could be Barkley from last year. So my question is, how do you win in fantasy if you don't have that guy? Just sort of occurred to me man, I know Dalvin Cook's risky, but Dalvin Cook could be one of the 5 best players in fantasy this year. Todd Gurley, I know he's risky, but he could be the best player in fantasy this year. If you don't take a running back there in round 2, how do you win fantasy if you don't have one of those just total stud running backs who just has a major impact every week?
I mean, you don't have to have a stud running back to win, first of all. Second of all, you're definitely right. When you're in a start 2 wide receiver league with a flex as opposed to a start 3 with a flex where you can start up to 4 wide receivers, it's definitely different. And that does increase the value of the elite running backs. But you don't have to have an elite running back to win in fantasy football. If you have points are points. If you have elite wide receivers in both of your receiver spots, in your flex spot, presumably a very good tight end if you're doing this type of a draft. I know in my pick by pick, a roster that I think you guys talked about on the show a couple of days ago, according to some of the listeners in the listener league draft with me. They mentioned that Adam was not a big fan of my 0 RB team in that league. I got Travis Kelce in that league. I got Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Jarvis Landry, and Curtis Samuel. So 4 very good receivers. I also got Patrick Mahomes and had this Mahomes, Hill, Kelce stack. I think of that like a DFS lineup where you're paying up for an expensive stack and you have cheap running backs. Now, what running backs did I get? I still got Matt Breida. I still got Kalen Ballage. I still got Ito Smith. 3 guys that will all have week 1 roles. And then I got some upside guys, Rashad Penny, Justice Hill. That doesn't look good if you're anchoring to ADP in August. But one of the big things I've written about a lot this year is having a longer view of things. And every NFL season is very chaotic. Running back injuries happen. Players take over. It happens every year. We are way too confident right now in what's going to happen in these backfields, and we do it every year. It's natural. It's what we know now when we're drafting. But every single year in the long-term trends, and I wrote an article about this called The Running Back Dead Zone, shows elite running backs tend to come from the first 2 rounds. And so I do think you can take one in the first couple of rounds. But from rounds about 3 to 7, you're not getting a better hit rate than you are even behind that. So it's fine to take these later running backs if you go wide receiver in the first couple of rounds, like you mentioned doing last night. Having said that, I don't mind taking an elite running back in the first or the second. It's really when you get into the 3rd and 4th and 5th that if you're going to go wide receiver, you should just commit to 0 running back and then essentially make sure that you're getting a ton of points out of every other spot on your roster and then just get by with the Matt Breidas. And Ito Smith is a guy who I think is just another one that's undervalued right now. A lot of hype around Brian Hill. There's some talk now that he might not make the 53-man. We're going to obviously find that out soon. But Ito Smith scored 3 touchdowns in the preseason, had 3 receptions for 45 yards in their second preseason game, caught another pass in their third preseason game. And he only got 4
I understand.
Ben,
I think it's that round 2 pick that I'm talking about.
I just want to ask a quick question in regard to that theory. If you're taking those backs that don't have a locked-in week 1 role, you said that they're going to have a role in week 1. The question becomes is when you don't have at least one guy that you can rely on, at what point do you start to get rid of those guys? And then you may regret that because you may have dropped the wrong one. And I think that's the thing that people necessarily fear is like Nick Chubb, for example, last year. People got away from him early in the season, and then, oh, bleep, look what he became. And so it's like, you're going to keep shuffling through a couple of it, probably, just the nature of it when you draft a team like that. Okay, Ogunbowale comes out of nowhere. Rashard comes out of nowhere, has a big week 1 performance, and you say, oh, I need to go get that guy, and I drop Ito Smith, or I drop, you're not going to drop Penny or Breida or I don't remember all the names that you had there, but, you get rid of one of those guys. I think that's the frustrating thing for people early on, and that's, I think, where people try to get maybe a little bit away from that.
The biggest word I would use to describe 0 running back is it's an uncomfortable draft strategy. Your draft roster is not going to look good, but it is a strategy that you can win with if you hit on some of these running backs. You can actually dominate if you hit on the running backs and get a big-name guy like a James Conner from last year because you're so good at other positions.
Sure.
I'd still like to give it a shot. I think you can do it this year. Particularly like with Austin Eckler could be the guy who ends up winning you your 0 RB league or at least getting you, through the first 10 weeks or so.
Oh, there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys.
Yeah, there are a lot of guys, but that's a guy that like could be really, really
Ben
good.
didn't draft any of them in his draft, but there's a lot of guys.